Welcome back to In Light of the Gospel. This is episode 83. Today's guest is a man named Melvin Martin. He was born and raised an Old Order horse-and-buggy Mennonite and became a Christian at 33 and is now a pretty big Instagram channel guy. His family, Martin Family Builders, I think it's called, has garnered quite a following, and for good reason. He's a family-operated business. They build houses, do new construction and renovations and things like that, and he has his boys on site and his family is very involved. It's a really beautiful thing to see, and I think it's a real good inspiration for young men to aim for, to think, how can I spend a lot of time with my wife and my children, teaching my boys, raising them up. And so I think you'll be very inspired by his story of how he came to this business, but probably even more importantly, how he came to faith in Christ. So thanks again for coming around, and God bless you. Well, if we were superstitious, we could maybe use the term third time's a charm. We've been trying to record this podcast, and each time we start, something happens technologically on my end here, and things just fall apart and it doesn't work. So here we are, third time.
Yes, that's right. This is a blessing. It's such a blessing to talk with you, Dan. I have done this once before, but this is only the second time, so this is
Nice.
awesome.
Well, it's been a pleasure just getting to know you. I met you a little bit at the Iowa camp 2 summers ago. And then now over the last, I think I was on 3 times with the Hebrews study online with Leon Martin and Andrew Schrock and Aaron Keaton. It's been quite a journey of going through the book of Hebrews chapter 1 and part of chapter 2 now. And I was commenting that to my friend that, you know, we got a former Amishman from, where was Andrew from originally? Is it Tennessee?
No, he lives in Ohio. That where the camp is where he grew up, actually.
Okay.
That's the farm that he grew up.
Okay. So he's got a pretty southern Amish Ohio accent. And then
Yeah.
you and Leon both have a little bit of the Pennsylvania and then / Iowa accent going on. And then Aaron
Yep.
Keaton's got that heavy Kentucky accent. And then I don't hear mine, but I'm sure I've got the Canadian accent. So my friend of mine says it's like a mild version of tongues.
That's right. That's awesome. I love it.
But it's been a pleasure getting to know you on those channels like that. But then also on top of that, I was quite surprised and very blessed to see that you and your family have this Instagram channel that's kind of blown up a little. It's like over 30, close to 40,000 followers last time I checked. And just really promoting the idea of fathers and husbands being very involved with their kids, and you're training your children as you work with them, and your son is, you know, married, but he still works with you, and then you have your other children doing all kinds of random jobs on the job site and at home, and just a real pleasure to see. And I think the world is longing for a taste of what used to be, right? And I really appreciate that you're bringing that to the world, so to speak, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. There's a great hunger out there for that. It seems like, people are kind of tired of the normal corporate world working, for a boss kind of thing. And God's design is that families be together and work together. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's been a blessing for us. It's been humbling, actually, also in the idea of us being out there, our family being out there and exposed. But it's been awesome. It's
Yeah,
been a blessing.
that's cool. Yeah, there's the church seems very aware, generally speaking, of the negativity of the feminist movement. And that happened, 50, 60, 70 years ago when a lot of the women were taken out of the home. I believe it kind of started up during Second World War. A lot of the men were gone from home, so women took the role of men on. And then there was this hunger for independence or freedom from the family. And the church sees that that's a major problem, that women are trying to get away from the home. But what the church has often failed to see is that just 50, 60, 70 years before that, most men were a central part of the home. Fathers made their livings with their children around, whether it was farming or carpentry or logging or whatever it might be, right? Fathers were the center hub of the family, so to speak, right?
Mhm. That's right. Yeah, that's right. And that's the way it should be. And we lost that. America as a whole has lost that. And unfortunately, the church has also kind of sunk into that,
Yeah.
um, become a part of that.
Well, I think of my own heritage. My parents were born and raised in Mexico, and they're see the thing is my if my grandfather would have ruled his house well as the scriptures command, my grandfathers, it would have been a very pleasant thing. And they have good memories of their childhood, no doubt, but they did make their living from home. Their father was around, but very often fathers in those days in Mexico, especially, were drunks or negligent or just didn't care. Um, but bringing back some of that model into our society now is it's not that far fetched. Like, you can still find ways to make a living with your children present and be having copious amounts of time together, learning as you go, right?
Yeah, that's right. That it is possible, even though most people think it's not, just because they've been duped into thinking that, you have to work in the corporate world and work for someone. But it's possible. It's very possible. You just have to think a little bit outside of the box, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I've been trying to teach men how to be very involved fathers, and I always have to kind of put that little caveat in there, saying, "Hey, I know you're away from home 60 to 70 hours a week. So when you get
Yes.
home, you need to be extra diligent." But can you imagine if that 60, 70 hours was limited down to 20 or 30 where you're actually away, or whatever number it might be, but that you're
Yes.
spending 20, 30 hours of your work life a week with some of your kids involved in the business, you could have a much better, deeper influence on them, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. It's actually flip-flopped in the society today. Like you said, fathers spend 60 to 70 hours a week at work. So they're spending more time with their coworkers and with their bosses and their job than they are with their family and their wives and their children, and that's not the way it should be.
Yeah. And also, the whole society has taken on a more feminine flavor in the last 50 to 70 years, and that is obviously due to the fact that fathers are either completely absent, like they're not there, they've left the family, or their presence is very little felt. And so young boys are being raised by moms, and the only way they know how to react is either out of this misguided masculinity that comes out in anger or vengeance or something like that, or they become very sensitive and soft. And this is where fathers have to be a part of the home atmosphere, right?
That's right. Amen. That's the father. It's the father's duty to not only teach their children how to work, but also their boys, especially how to be men. And and even girls,
Yeah.
they also girls need that male connection, right? Because if they don't have a male connection with their fathers, a good, healthy relationship, then they're going to go seek it with other boys,
Yeah.
and that's what happens.
Yeah, I find there's a lot of fathers, and I understand it can be a bit awkward for some men, maybe especially who've never experienced it. Like, I was raised in a home with just six brothers. I had no sisters. And
I
so
see. Yeah.
seeing a young girl develop and become a young woman before my eyes was a new thing to me. But I made it a point to never distance myself from them. Where some fathers, when the girls get to that age, they kind of distance themselves and don't know how to react. But I would like to
Yes.
think that it's been very good for the nurture of their souls to say, "Hey, I'm having a hard day. Things are not going well for me. This boy maybe hurt my feelings, or this thing over there has been bothering me." And they can come and we can hug, and there's no distance from me. The physical connection is still there. And fathers
Yes.
definitely are crucial to the raising of healthy girls.
Yes, that's correct. There needs to be a healthy connection physically, like hugging and whatever in a proper way.
Mm-hmm.
And we weren't taught that either really growing up, like you said, I had to learn that with my girls that it's okay to be able to hug my girls and in a proper way, and
Mm-hmm.
they need that connection, right?
Yeah.
They need to know that you love them and you're there for them.
Yeah. The last thing, and maybe the most important thing that I've been trying to really emphasize for family, is another thing that's often missing from families where the father is away from home all the time, or where mother and father are both away from home, is that the foundation of a solid family is the marriage. And if
That's
you're
right.
gone again 60 to 80 hours a week working on your business, and then even when you get home, your mind's always somewhere else, and you can't ever just spend actual time with your wife, like, what do you expect to happen? you have to. I've heard somebody say, I think it was a secular guy saying that the average couple spends less than 90 minutes a week actually talking. And I'm like, 90 minutes a week, that's a few minutes a day. Like, when are you ever actually communicating, right?
Yes, that's correct. That is correct. That's so true. I mean, we have to be have more of a connection with our wives than 90 minutes a week. I mean, that's terrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, and you can do that with, it also comes down for me and what I have learned with, doing my family business, because I had to change my mindset with that. I kind of had the mindset of, working at a job, even though I had my own business, I was still working at work, at a job for, 80, 90 hours a week, and then, spending minimal time with my family. That's how it was until 4 or 5 years ago, when I kind of had a mindset change where to involve my wife and my children in my business and only have, strictly a family business. And so that it comes down to choices that we make,
Yeah.
right? And what for choices are we making? Are we just going with the flow, or are we stepping outside the box and making some choices to be intentional about spending more time with our children and our wives?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's super critical, because some people don't feel like they can choose. It's one or the other. And some people have made that. Like, even for myself, I feel like I made a choice to work around the house and then homestead through the years, and it has cost me financially. Like, I could have made
Yes.
more money just going out and getting after it and working hard, but there was an investment I was trying to make. And sometimes, if you do it wisely, and I don't think I always did it wisely, you can do both. You can be successful financially and still invest that quality, quantity time with your wife and family, right? And it seems like, from what I'm looking at from the outside, that you've done that. You're have a developed a pretty good business there.
Yes, that's correct. It can be done. It's just a matter of thinking outside the box and making choices and thinking differently and being intentional about that, about being, making money and spending time with your family. And so it's very doable.
Yeah, I guess the difference sometimes can be, in the book of Timothy, he says, um, "He that desires to be rich falls into a trap, a snare of the devil." Right. But then a few verses later in the same book, he says, "Charge them that are rich in this world that they be rich in good works, be ready to distribute," and all that. And so it tells me that there's real danger in wanting to be rich. There's nothing wrong with being rich. And so
That's correct.
when you're thinking, how can I provide a good service to the people around me and do it with joy and gratitude with my family, and then it produces wealth, great. Or even just, to be comfortably living, you know, that seems like the ideal.
Yeah, it is. And, the other thing is that a lot of people have this mindset that, you know, taking and working with your children in a service for other people is bad for some reason. Like that's not really possible and it's not a good thing. But the thing is all the times that I've had my boys with me on the job site, uh, working for other people, Sean, he's my oldest son. He started working with me when he was 12, and I have never heard any negative comment ever
Hmm.
from anyone. They always thought this was the greatest thing
Interesting.
that, and so it's a lie when it's a lie from the devil actually, that it's not a good thing for
Right.
some reason because you have your children with you, young children, so
There's obviously some potential legal issues around some of that, up here in Canada, especially. They're very anal about, the age you have to be on a job site. But there's little creative ways of getting around that. Building certain things at home and then going out on job sites and putting it up without the sons or daughters around. But there's ways of
that's right.
around it. I know families around here that do more family-based businesses as well, and there's definitely ways of doing it. So
That's right. Yeah, you have to check your local laws or whatever. You definitely don't want to, be out there breaking the law.
yeah,
But yeah, so
yeah,
you
no,
want to make
that's
sure you're.
That's very exciting to see. But For those of people that don't know, your background is definitely not being technologically savvy. You were raised with horse and buggy style upbringing, Mennonite. What would you call it? What's the type of Mennonite?
It'd be Old Order Mennonite.
Old Order.
Yeah, horse and buggy Mennonite.
Yeah. And you were raised in Pennsylvania, if I understand correctly.
That is correct. I grew up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and I believe it or not, most Mennonites are farmers, and most of them have big families. So I was neither of those. I only had one sister. I didn't have any brothers. And I grew up in town. I grew up in downtown Farmersville and right in the middle of town and had a blacktop driveway and
Hmm.
about 1 acre. And we had a horse and buggy and a barn in our driveway. And my dad had a business. And so we were kind of city slickers. We weren't country boys.
Interesting. Yeah, depending on what kind of Mennonites you're thinking of, you'd have a totally different view of it. Myself, kind of the same way. My parents both worked at a factory. Of all places, they worked at a tobacco factory. Uh, you know, so smoking was kind of taboo in the Mennonite culture, but it
Yes.
was the way of making money in this community here. So that was just how it was.
Mhm.
And I went to public school, wore store bought clothes, and we had electricity and cars and all that. We just didn't have some of the technology, TV and videos and all that kind of stuff, right? So there's a lot of variety among the Mennonite circles.
Yeah, there is. I mean, we had electricity too, and telephone. Like we had a landline phone, no cell phones, um, but yeah, we didn't have any TV, no radio, no computers,
Okay.
no technology.
But the idea of a family business was not completely foreign to you then. Is your dad operated in the backyard and he did taxidermy, right?
Yes, that's correct. My dad was a taxidermist, big hunter. He loved to hunt, and we mounted every North American species you can think of, right? I mean, from deer to fish and turkeys and grizzly bears and black bear and anything
Wow.
really. So yeah, that's what he did, and I helped in the shop. So we had, and my mom, believe it or not, worked with my dad all day long.
Wow.
Him and mom would work in the shop, and me and my sister.
Are your parents still around?
Yes, they are. They both, and believe it or not, he's still doing taxidermy
That was going
work.
to be my next question.
Yeah,
Still doing it, eh?
yeah, he's still in Farmersville, but he don't live at the same property anymore. He lives about a mile down the road.
Okay. Yeah, he must know his way around some animals then, I'm sure.
He does. Yeah, he's good at what he does.
Does he still
He's a
hunt?
oh yeah. Yeah. He will hunt till he dies.
There you
That's
go.
it's his passion.
Interesting. Among our kind of Mennonites, it was not common to hunt that at least not that I was aware of. There was very few of our kind of Mennonites that were actually hunters. Now, of the younger generation, my age and younger, quite a few of them have gotten into hunting, but it wasn't that common.
Hmm. That's interesting.
Yeah,
I because I grew up we hunted a lot.
yeah.
So, yeah.
So, as far as religion goes and relating to God was concerned, what was your take personally on God? I mean, obviously, the church's influence, however you were raised, probably had a large effect on how you thought of God.
Yeah. So I knew that God existed and I knew that Jesus existed and I went to church every Sunday, but unfortunately I didn't have any relationship with God or with Jesus. I was kind of a rebel, actually, in a way, in a sense. I did a lot of, as a teenager, I never really rebelled against my parents. Like, I had a good relationship with my parents, and I hunted with my dad, so I did a lot of things with my dad. But as far as my social life, as a teenager, was not the best. Like, I did a lot of partying, drinking. Those kinds of things. That I never did drugs. There was drugs at some parties already that we were at, but I never
Hmm.
went that far as doing drugs. But we did a lot of partying. We watched movies.
Hmm.
All this was done, believe it or not, on the sneak. Like most of the things that my parents didn't even know was going on. So
Okay.
I lived a very double life. I partied and those kinds of things. And then on Sunday, I would go to church. And so I was living a very double life, which caught up with me eventually. But It took a while. It was after I was married. I was 33 years old when I came to the Lord. So
Okay. I guess for those few people, like most of the people that tune into this channel are of a Mennonite background of some sort or plain, not all. So for those, 10 or 15% of people who are not from the Mennonite culture, they might be thinking, excuse me, drinking, smoking, partying, drugs? What are you talking
yeah,
about? But the more you get to know plain people and plain circles, the more you realize that some of the most plain, some of the most conservative, reserved people, some of the darkest sins are hiding right there in the culture, right? So it
yeah,
probably
that's
wasn't very
right.
uncommon for you to live that way.
No, that's right. It wasn't actually, and believe it or not, in Lancaster County amongst the Amish, it's really bad. The partying going on. One of the wildest and the uh, most partying group amongst the Amish was called the Antiques, and we used to go to some of their parties, and it's a lot of sin, a
Wow,
lot of doubled life. I would call it living a double life. And to the society and to the outside world, everything looks perfect, but believe it or not, inside there's a lot of sin and a lot of immorality
interesting.
going on.
Reminds you of Jesus's rebuke of the Pharisees. You whitewashed tombs. You're
That's right.
outwardly you clean the outside of the cup, but the inside is full of filth and dead men's bones and so on. Right?
Yeah, that's right. And I also have to say that, there's quite a few Mennonites probably that never lived that way.
That's right.
They're not all like that. Like we can't put them all in the same box because I had friends in the Mennonite church that did not participate
Right.
in any of that, but
Yeah,
I
that's
did.
that's a good reminder. I've been kind of rebuked a time or two for always shedding a negative light on the Mennonites, but there are whole sects and groups and individuals
Yes.
who clearly love God, love the scriptures, and
Yes.
they live the life of a Mennonite, the plainness out of the joy of their heart. Others are doing it
Yes.
out of the restriction of the community, right? And so it's
That is
you
correct.
can see
That's
two people and they're not doing it for the same reasons.
exactly. And that I was doing it because that's what I was required to do as a Mennonite, as a restriction of the community, not out of a heart,
Yeah.
out of my heart. That was not me at all.
So was your Mennonite upbringing kind of the similar to ours too, where you just go through the motions of becoming a member and getting baptized and all that, so that you can be free to be married and move on with life?
Yeah, that's correct. That's where I was. I In our Mennonite church, you got baptized at around 18 to 20
Very
years
similar.
old. And so that was when I was 19 is when I got baptized, and I did it because I wanted to get married. I was dating at that time, and my wife now, that is my wife now, was my girlfriend then. She also joined the church. I think she might have joined. I don't remember if she joined the same year I did, but I think she did, but she had a total different experience as far as, when she got baptized and joined the church. She was actually saved
Hmm.
when because they give you that booklet, the 12 articles I think it is of faith that you're supposed to read before you get baptized, and I didn't even read it. I mean, it's kind of stupidity now looking back, but I didn't even read it. I just wanted to go through with this, right? And I really didn't care. I just wanted to get it done. And
Yeah.
so, but my wife, she threw that book off to the side and read Romans, the book of
Wow.
Romans. And that made total sense to her. The book, the 12 Articles of Faith, made no sense to her. And
Interesting.
so,
Well,
yeah, she had a wonderful experience getting baptized and joining the church. But
that's awesome. I think about when you get a new product of some sort, a new coffee maker or a new cell phone or whatever, you get this big manual and book. It's like, I don't need that. I'm just going to toss that aside. I know how to operate this thing, right? And
yeah.
we treat Christianity that way too, where, yeah, sure, I accept, or religion in particular. But your wife, did she then come to faith and understanding of the gospel just simply through reading the scriptures, or was the gospel known? Was there people with assurance of salvation around?
No, you didn't talk about insurance of salvation. Not in our circle. No, she just strictly got saved by reading the book of Romans,
That's
by
awesome.
reading the Bible. And because yeah, you didn't even take your Bible to
Oh
church,
no.
right? That
Yeah.
was kind of looked down upon.
Yeah.
So yeah, that no, there was really no other people around that you talked about those kinds of things, really. I mean, I can't, here again, I can't put the blame on the church because I know they did, they preached in German and I really didn't understand German and I kind of use it as the excuse sometimes, but it really isn't because I had a Bible, right? And I had all of the tools that I needed to understand salvation. And they would preach about being born again in church, but
Yeah.
so we heard it, right? But I don't know, it's just
Yeah,
never
God
grasped
can
it.
use all sorts of means and methods. One of the guys that very early on, when I became a Christian, that I spoke to, he said he actually got saved sitting and listening to an old colony minister preach the gospel, and he knows that the minister himself did not understand the gospel, but he presented it in such a way. Maybe he was reading somebody else's sermon. I don't know what it was, but he said he was listening, and suddenly it clicked. Christ died for my sins and rose again. I'm free, and the preacher himself is droning on in his boring monotone voice and doesn't know what kind of thrill is happening in the soul of the person who just got saved, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. God can use any way and any person, and that's why I know there is people that are in the Mennonite community that are saved,
Yeah,
that are born again.
for
I know
sure.
there is.
For sure.
So
Some of
yeah,
these sweet ladies who just give their life to praying for their wandering children and stuff, and they have
yeah,
complete trust in the Lord, and maybe they
yes,
couldn't articulate it the way that it ought to be, I don't know, but you know that their faith is absolutely genuine and they're trusting in
yep.
Christ, and that's their only hope and all that, and God's pretty gracious to people, right?
That's right. That's the beautiful thing about God. He meets you where you are, and that's why actually getting saved and is by faith, because it's and he doesn't require you to have like this certain amount of faith that to get saved. He just asks you to believe by faith.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It doesn't have to be a certain amount of faith, and he'll meet you right where you are.
Because
And
it's
that's
not your faith that's saving you, it's faith
that's
in
right.
what saves you. What is it
In what
saving you?
saves you.
Christ saves, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Amen.
But it is interesting too. I had a friend who got saved, and I was already left the old colony system when I became a Christian, but my friend was still there before I got saved, and he started bringing his Bible to church, and it was very much frowned upon. Like, what do you don't trust the preachers, or do you think you're somehow more important now, or who do you think you are? Right? It's a weird attitude.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I didn't get saved either until I left the Mennonites. Well, I was kind of car Mennonite, but anyway, we'll
Okay.
get to that.
So yeah, you were 19, 20, 21, somewhere in that range when you got married.
Yes, I was actually 22.
Okay.
I was 22, my wife was 20. That's
Gotcha.
correct.
And then
Yeah, we got go ahead.
you were still in Pennsylvania.
Yes. Yeah, we lived in Lancaster County for 2 years after we got married. And then I just didn't see any future there, so to speak. And by saying that, I mean there were so many people. I was just working a job. The properties were very expensive, and I just didn't see a lot of opportunity there for me. And so my father-in-law, he owned some land in Iowa, in Mason City, Iowa, northeast Iowa, and so he had owned a house out there, and he wondered if we would want to move out there.
Okay.
And it was a young community. It was probably maybe 20 families living there at that time when we moved there. And so we said, sure, that sounds like an opportunity to grow. And we didn't really want to raise our family there in Lancaster County. Not that you can't, but we just felt like we needed to move on. And so we moved to Iowa in 2002.
Yeah. Yeah, wherever Mennonites gather, it seems that their prosperity kind of follows around.
That's right.
And so when they get to a place like Lancaster and they've filled the place up, and there's all these different groups of Mennonites, they're all working hard and creating industry, then all of a sudden it gets very expensive, right? And so that's where Mennonites have often branched off and established new communities all over, and then they make that area prosperous, and that's a good heritage.
It is. Yeah, that's right. It's perfect, really. In all reality, there's a lot of people that look at from the outside. into the Mennonite culture, and they think that this is the way life should be, and it is. Really, it is. I mean, we were taught to work hard and grow our own food and start our own business, be entrepreneurs, and Mennonites are very good entrepreneurs.
Yeah, yeah.
They're not scared to start their own businesses.
So, I know you told me the other day that you had started helping with your dad, the taxidermy, and then you moved into working into construction at some point, and you did several odds and ends of different types of jobs through the years.
Yeah, that's correct. So I worked with my dad until I was 16, and then he gave me the opportunity to either get a job or get more involved in his business. And I didn't really care for taxidermy work. It was a little too detailed for me. I could do it, but I didn't have the patience.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, fine, I'm going to get a job. And so I got a job in a factory for 2 years. And then when I turned 18, I started working on the job site because I love construction work. I love building things. And I did all types of construction jobs from 18 until we moved to Iowa, actually, which was in 2022, and I was 22 years old. So from 18 to 22, I worked commercial, residential, agricultural, construction, concrete, you name it, I did it. And but I enjoyed residential. And then that's when I moved to Iowa. I worked for my brother-in-law in the concrete business for about 2 years, and then I went off and started my own residential, building houses, remodeling houses at that point.
Okay. But you did spend your pretty much your whole 20s still unsaved, just religious and resisting God,
Yep.
or what was the relationship there?
Yeah, I don't know if yeah, I probably resisted God in all reality, but I didn't really acknowledge God. Like, I was just living my life, and I would do all the right things. I could pray and, you know, make all the right motions and everything. I was just going through the motions, so to speak, and just not having any relationship with God or acknowledging God and acknowledging Jesus at all.
Hmm.
And so my life was kind of a mess, actually,
Oh, really?
in reality. I was in my had my own business, and it was just I was a workaholic. I had an anger issue, and most people didn't know that. Like, from the outside, they thought I was a nice guy, which I was, but I did have a serious anger issue, and my marriage was not very good. I was just spiraling downhill,
Hmm.
you would say, slowly, and then one day, I had a cell phone I was not supposed to have. I had a laptop computer I was not supposed to have, and because of my business, and I got caught with that.
Hmm.
And so I got in trouble with the church, right? And I had to make a decision. So either I had to sell my business and become a good Mennonite, or leave the Mennonites.
Wow.
And so I didn't even pray about it. This, looking back, this is really stupid, but I didn't pray about it or anything. I just decided in my mind that I'm going to sell my business and I'm going to become a Mennonite and
Okay.
stay a good Mennonite. And I tried that for 6 months, and it did not work. So I
Okay.
sold my business, and I worked for the guy that bought my business, which was probably another mistake. But um, it just didn't work. I had established already a clientele, and people knew I was good at what I was doing, and I just could not leave my profession, what I was doing. I
Hmm.
tried other things, growing produce, and I didn't like that. And it was so then I told my wife, Brandon, my second son, he's 15 now, going on to 16. And the day he was born, I told my wife, that's it. This is it. I'm going to go get my license. I'm going to get a car. This is just not working. And I left that day, and I called my friend, and I said, "Hey, I want to go in and take my driver's test. I'm getting my license." And so I bought a truck and I bought a van, and I left the Old Order Mennonites, horse and buggy Mennonite, and started going to a car Mennonite called Horning Mennonite. You were required to have your car black that you went to church
Okay.
with, but otherwise it didn't have to be black. And so that is when I left. And at this point, I was still not saved at all. I was still going through the motions.
Wow, that's quite a step, though. So the whole idea of selling your business and working for someone else was to get rid of those technologies that you had, the cell phone and the laptop and all that.
Yes, that's correct. And
Interesting.
that was the only reason that I sold my business, really, which
Yeah.
was kind of foolish now looking back. But
You and I have both talked about the benefits and the things that are praiseworthy among the Mennonite culture, the hard work ethic, and the passing on from generation to generation the traditions and the values and all that. And it's clear to see that those things are of great value. But it seems that they become very outward focused and think if they can just control the outer man, then they'll be okay. But way too often the heart is not in it, and then you produce hypocrites, and that's the danger of external religion like that, right?
yes, that's correct, and that's what I was. I was a very big hypocrite, and that actually, and we talked earlier about how God uses things and people to draw them to Him, and that is, He actually used my hypocritical ways to draw me to Him, and I'll explain that to you if you're okay. I'll
Yeah.
keep going with my story. So I got a car and I had a pickup, right? So now I could drive, I could have a cell phone, I could have a computer without getting into trouble, right? Because the church I went to allowed that. It was still a Mennonite church. But one thing that we were not allowed to do, that was listen to the radio. And so in order to control that, they made you take your antenna off your car. But they didn't make you take your radio out of your car. So the hypocrite that I was, I took my antenna off my car and I went and took a metal coat hanger and I wrapped it around where you attach your antenna to your car. It was just thread. You know, it was an older. Nowadays, cars don't even have antennas, but back then they did.
Yep.
And I wrapped my metal coat hanger around there and made it that it touched the bottom of the hood of my truck. So now I could pull radio stations without an antenna. And so, being the good person that I thought I was, and being an outward, like you just explained earlier, just going by that my outer man, I thought I was a good person. I started listening to a Christian radio station,
Ah.
and was the beginning of my journey. And I listened to David Jeremiah, and he's still on the radio today. He's a
Yep.
very popular Baptist preacher. And I started listening to him every day. He was on at 9 o'clock in the morning, and when I could not listen to him, like for some reason because of my schedule, I would go on his website and listen to him that way.
Yeah.
And I started hearing things, like I started hearing the truth, right? And like being born again, and I'm like, what is this? Like, and one day I remember, specifically remember, he started preaching about worldliness. And to me, in my eyes, he was worldly. Like,
Absolutely.
you know, and I was like, this guy, he's talking about being separate from the world and what worldliness actually is. And that took me for a loop. I was like, either he doesn't understand worldliness or I don't understand worldliness, because
I
in
see.
my eyes he was worldly, but he was talking about being separate from the world, and I'm like, I don't understand. I did not understand it, right? And so God was working, and I started listening to tapes, CDs. I listened to Danny Keniston.
Yep.
I listened to. I was just Delbert Schrock.
Most
Many
Mose
different.
Stoltzfus.
Yes, most those. I just started absorbing. I was hungry, for the truth, right? But at this point, I still wasn't saved. It went a year until I surrendered, and I specifically, God meets you wherever you are, and He met me in the seat of my truck in my driveway. I was remodeling a house. We were going to move to a different property, and I was sitting at our new property. Nobody was there except me, and I was working on the house. It was late at night, and I don't know, I don't remember specifically the exactly how it all went, but I was sitting in the driveway in my truck and I was listening to something, and I just turned it off, and I just right there I surrendered my life to Christ,
Mm,
and said that I am done with my life. I am done trying to control my life, because at that point, I would say I probably reached the bottom of my spiral. I was spiraling down all those years, and it got worse and worse and worse, and I was at the bottom.
wow.
And that's where he met me.
And you were about 30 years old?
I was 33.
33.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, that's incredible. I know the charity ministries, they did an awful lot of good work in Mennonite plain communities. I actually got saved in the middle of listening to two messages, one by Roman Kaufman and one by
Hmm.
Jerry Mahor. The Worth of a
Yeah.
Soul and Salvation Crystal Clear. Those
Yeah.
messages, they reached thousands and thousands of people, right? And I saw for the first time in my mind's eye Christ crucified in my place. Jerry Mahor and Roman Kaufman talked about the beating and the punishment that Jesus received. And then Jerry Mahor says it ought to have been you on the cross. He suffered this punishment in your place for your sins. And I was driving too. I was in the passenger seat of a truck, and my coworker suddenly recognized that something was happening to me, right? He was already a Christian.
Hmm.
And I just kind of turned away, trying to keep my emotion from him. And he shut the audio off. And right away, I didn't know that I had gotten saved, but I said to him right away, I was like, what about my brother Pete and Joe? Or was it Pete and Neil? I can't remember for sure. I was thinking of two brothers in particular. But about a month later, I recognized that that was where my attention turned away from trying to
Hmm.
find a solution to my sins to now
Yeah.
saying, hey, I've got a solution. I want to offer it to my brothers. And it
Right.
was so crystal clear to me, right? Salvation crystal clear, no pun intended. It was just so clear that I I'm not trying to get my sins forgiven. I'm not trying to deal with them one by one. Christ died in my place. He suffered for me. And if he died with my sins, then that means my sins are gone. They're completely removed, right?
That's right.
And it
That's
was a very
right.
beautiful time for me. That was back in
Yeah.
2003 for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, that is so beautiful. I mean, the grace of God is so beautiful, and when you come to understand it, that, like you said, that it's Christ that took my sins, and that's it, and it's just such a freeing thing, that because I was so tired of doing and trying to be in my
Never
own
measuring
power,
up.
never measuring up. I had no assurances. And here's the other thing that really was a big deal to me, was I had no power over sin.
Yeah.
I had zero power over sin. And so I had a serious anger issue, and I would get angry and do bad things, in the midst of my anger. And because anger in itself, the Bible says, is not necessarily wrong. It's what you do when you're angry and what you do with anger. Righteous anger
Yep.
is okay, but I did not have righteous anger. And so I would get angry and do bad things when I was angry. And then I would say to myself, I'm never going to do this again, you know.
Yep.
But believe it or not, it, a couple months later, I would do it all over again. And
If
I
not
had
worse.
and worse, and I had no power over sin. And when I gave my life to Christ, and immediately I had power
Yeah.
over sin, and that was just a blessing.
That's
So
awesome. So there would have been quite a few changes probably in the family at that point too, just the way you worship and collect your family together for those kinds of things.
yeah, that's correct. No, it changed drastically, actually. Not all at once,
Sure.
obviously, but it my wife was the first one to notice it. Like, I didn't know what happened. I mean, I knew that something happened, but I didn't understand what happened exactly. But it was like the next day, my wife was like, what happened to you? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah.
And my friends started, and believe it or not, Leon Martin was my friend at that time, and he wasn't saved either at that point. And he said to me, I remember one day he said to me, he said, Melvin, what happened to you? You're different, you know. And I was like, well, I don't really know. I don't know what happened. But
Could,
I didn't at that point. I didn't know, but
couldn't
I
really
was
put it into
still
words just yet, eh?
no, I couldn't.
Yeah, for me, the ability to articulate what had happened, um, it happened fairly quickly. I can put words together fairly smoothly, right? So it was about a month after I got saved that I was telling somebody, yeah, there was this time about a month ago. I was sitting there, I was listening to Jerry Mahor, Roman Kaufman, and it all kind of just came clear. And I'm like, oh, I've heard people talk about getting saved, being born again. That's what happened. I know there was
Yeah,
a new beginning right there, right? So it was then I was able to start saying to people, this is what happened. This is how I became a Christian. This is when I got
yeah,
saved, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that's cool.
yeah.
And so you were still doing your own business. This is where maybe, obviously, like you said, not everything happened right away, but if you kind of put the next few years into perspective, how did it slowly shift to a family run business?
Yeah, so at that point, yeah, I had actually around 7 employees at that point,
Okay.
and I was pretty overwhelmed, with my business and everything, and I was under a lot of stress, and I was burned out actually. And so that's when I started making changes after about, I don't know, it was maybe a year or so after I got saved that I started making changes and got rid of some of my employees and downsized my business. And that's when I started getting my son Sean involved, and he started going along with me on the job site. I still had 2 employees at that point. So I downsized from 7 employees to, well, it was like 3 or 4, and then eventually down to 2, and then Sean
Mm,
over probably maybe 2-year period, 3-year period, something like that.
yeah.
Uh, and yeah, that's how I started going into kind of the family business model, so to speak, more so.
Yeah, that's great.
But I still had that mentality though, my old mentality as far as um, running a business and thinking that I have to keep my business separate from my family, so to speak. That didn't happen until
Your
I
son,
actually
your son
moved.
just became an employee almost.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Uh, I knew that I wanted to get my family more involved in what I was doing, but I still had the old mindset kind of. I actually really didn't get my family fully involved in my business until I moved here to Kentucky, which was 4 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I've given a lot of credit to the Denny Keniston Godly Home series through the years too. There's plenty of issues that I have with the charity movement and how it's liberated me from dead religion, and then I feel like through the influence of it, I became a different kind of religious. I got saved, and then uh, moved from simply trusting in grace and Christ, and then moving back to a more of a works-based kind of Christianity again. Maybe not the fault of the teaching there. Maybe it was just my own understanding of how it all operated. And then we all know Denny Keniston was a flawed man, had issues too. But he really
Sure.
emphasized this idea of getting back to your home, being part of the family, turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and the hearts of the children to their fathers. And he gave examples and stories too of corporate people who are moving up the ranks and working in a high-rise building, and they give it all up to go home and build picnic tables with their kids, and crazy stories like that, growing vegetables for the first time. And the way he expressed it, it was very inspirational to me to think, how can I be around my family? And it set me on a different course, right? So now, I mean, the life that he seemed to be describing is what your Instagram channel looks like.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And the funny thing is that I didn't really, here's what happened when I got saved. Like I was listening to, David Jeremiah. I still listen to him some, but not much. There was actually a revival that happened in our community, and Leon Martin was part of that revival. He
Okay.
got saved. He got saved probably about 6 months after I did, something like that. But there was a lot of families, young families, that came to know the Lord and got saved. And we started having Bible study together.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Me, our family, Liam Martin's family, uh, several other families. And so my shift, like I didn't listen to other preachers so much. I more got involved with these other young families that were got saved, and we were getting into the Word together. And that
Okay.
was such a blessed time. I mean, we were growing together, right? And understanding, and we would spend hours, like literally we would have Bible study at 7 and we'd get home at 1 in the morning, right? I mean, and we go to work the next day. It was so awesome. So uh that's kind of how I proceeded from being saved and growing in the Lord, was growing with other young believers,
Yeah.
which was good. One thing, which I don't know, do you know, when you talk about Jerry Mahore came to our community several times actually during that time, like when I got saved for probably about 5 years or 6 years after that, he would come to our community and preach every now and then. So I know Jerry very well.
Okay.
The other person that I don't know if you know them or not, I was trying to think of his name now. His name is slipping my mind. I shouldn't have said anything because I can't think of his name. He lives in Ohio. Um, he was friends with Jerry Mahore at Fisher, Chris Fisher. I don't know if
Okay.
you know him or
No.
not. They lived in our community there in Iowa. He was how would you say, seasoned believer. He had been a believer for a long time, and he was a blessing in speaking into our lives and helping us grow. So we had a few like him and maybe one other person that was kind of had been a believer for many years that helped us, but otherwise we were all babes, you would
Yeah.
say, in the faith and growing together. So
Yeah,
it was
there's
awesome.
there's real blessing in that for sure, but it does seem like so many of those young groups, they do get lopsided because of their immaturity and lack of
That's right.
seasoned, solid faith, right? But it is the way that God often seems to operate. Even Jesus, when he chose his 12 disciples, he talks about not pouring new wine into old wineskins and whatnot, and it seems like it's a repeated process where God can't seem to operate with the elderly people, and he has to kind of start fresh and say, okay, well, let's pour this truth into somebody else. But definitely it's of great value to have somebody mature, wiser, a little bit of gray hair to lead and guide us along, right? We made plenty of mistakes for those reasons.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
No, that's right. So, as far as getting my family like business and what I am doing now as with our family included in our business and everything, I can't really say that I learned that from someone else. Like it was just a choice or a decision that I made on my own,
Okay.
so to speak, just because that's what I wanted to do.
Nice.
Um, because I was tired of doing it the corporate way.
Nice. Yeah, you could look at the providence of God and his leading and guiding, and look back and say God was kind of squeezing you into this position, right? But it's nice to see that all started then kind of in the beginning stages of COVID and all the shutdowns and everything, eh?
Yeah, that's correct. It was actually right around that time when we moved here to Kentucky. It was right when COVID was happening.
Why
Um,
did you move to Kentucky?
well, that's another story in itself, right there. So our our oldest daughter, Amanda, she got married to a guy from down here,
Okay.
actually, and so he I was trying to think. Okay, they met in Colorado at a family camp. We had went to a family camp in Colorado, and they met there, and then they started courting, and it wasn't very long. She got married. She was barely 18 when they got married, and they courted for maybe 8 months, I think it was, something like that. And then she moved down here, and that was part of it. We kind of that's partly what drew us down here, but it also felt like the Lord was leading us down here, and that He had a change for our family. And and that included my work, like, my getting my family involved in my job,
Yeah.
which I did not see that at that point, right? I just felt why through prayer and fasting our family did together, and just, asking God, what now? What do you want us to do? And he kind of we felt like he was leading us down here,
Yeah.
and there was going to be change in our
That's
family, and that's why we moved.
interesting. And you had a good clientele and a solid business in Iowa, and now to move to Kentucky and in a way start fresh with all clients and everything.
Yeah, and but the interesting thing is, before we even moved, I had a guy call me and say, "I want you to build my house for me when
Uh,
you get here."
Okay.
It's crazy, how God works, and it's awesome
And
actually,
so
because God.
with that transition, you immediately changed into this more family run model.
That's correct. So that was kind of what that move is kind of what I used to change into my family model that we have
And
now
now you have
in our
no
business.
employees.
I have no employees. That's
Okay.
right. It's just me and my boys.
You ever hire
And
sub trades, or do you guys do everything?
no, we do sub out some things. Yeah,
Yeah.
we sub things out to other contractors. But as
Nice.
far as all the work that we do, it's just done with me and my boys.
Okay. How many children do you have? I've seen some of your daughters working on site now and then too, eh?
Yeah, so I have 7 children, 5 boys and 2 girls, and our 3 oldest are married.
Okay.
My oldest daughter is married, obviously. She has 2 children and another one on the way. And then Sean, that works with me, my oldest son, he's married. They have 1 child. They live here in our community. Um, and then my second daughter, she was working with us, but she just got married in October of last year, and she moved to Mitchell, South Dakota. So
Okay.
they live in a different community. And then I have 4 more boys
Nice.
that are still living at home. And so
Nice. How old's the youngest?
he's 7.
There
He'll
you
be
go.
8 in a few days, actually. So
Okay, so you still got a long time to go with to train up a bunch of boys and how to do things.
I do. That's right. I have a couple more coming along that and that's another thing that where God is really gracious. I made a lot of mistakes with my older children, especially my second son. I made a lot of mistakes, but God is gracious, and He has been very good with our family, and very very blessed, and healing some of that,
Yeah.
and how He allows us to make mistakes, and He meets us where we are,
Yeah.
and
Makes
helps us
makes it
along with
part of
that.
the story, right?
It does, yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Praise the
right. It's
Lord.
awesome.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's exciting, and I'm glad it finally worked for us to actually record the conversation. What was there any other thing that you were kind of hoping to major on, or anything that you were hoping to point out?
No, I don't think so. I just want to say that it's only by the grace of God that our family is where we are, because it. And the thing is, though, is that through the journey, it has made us
Yep.
stronger in the Lord, and it has helped us grow together as a family, and all the challenges we meet. There's a lot of times here in America when you give your life to the Lord, uh, people think that everything's going to be perfect and everything is going to be just the way it should be, and that is a lie, because Satan doesn't like when you change from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light,
Right.
and so, um, but that being said, it it all the challenges that we face, whether it be with family and working together and in our marriages and all those things, as long as we keep our focus on Jesus, and He is the head of our home, and, and that needs to be our focus, and He can help us through whatever we face.
Amen. No, that's perfect. Excellent. Well, I really appreciate you taking this time on a Saturday morning to give us that story. It's inspirational. I'm very blessed for sure.
Yeah. No, this is a blessing. I really enjoyed it. I always enjoy talking with you and talking about the Lord and what He does in our lives.
Amen. Right on. Thanks a lot, Melvin.
You bet.